Nobody clapped when Dina Harlow walked into the mess hall of the warship Steadfast Accord. Nobody even looked up. 6 different alien species sat at 6 different table sections, eating 6 different meals, and pretending the others did not exist. The only sound was chewing, the hum of the ship's engines, and somewhere near the back, a quiet argument about who got the last water ration. Dina stood in the doorway with her kit bag over one shoulder, scanning the room the way a medic scans a wound. She was not looking for bleeding. She was looking for who was hurting. She found him fast out. A small soldier sat alone at the far end of the lowest table. He had 4 thin arms, a body covered in dark bronze plates, and wide black eyes that stared at a half-empty tray. He was Sorali. Dina had read about them during the transport flight. Insectoid species, low-ranked in the Galactic Union's military hierarchy, often assigned to the worst positions, given the oldest equipment, and treated like furniture by officers who barely remembered their names. Dina walked across the mess hall, past Draelith soldiers who towered over her like armored lizards, past the slim, gray Palori officers who tracked her with cold, intelligent eyes, and sat down right next to the small Sorali soldier. He flinched. "Hey," she said. "I am Dina. What is your name?" He blinked all 4 of his eyes at once. "Private Finney Koo." "Finney, are you going to eat that bread roll?" "It is not bread. It is compressed nutrient paste shaped into a disc. Close enough." She pulled her own ration pack from her bag, tore it open, and pushed half of it toward him. "Trade you." Finney stared at the offered food like it was a trap. Around them, soldiers from other tables had started watching. A Draelith sergeant leaned over and whispered something to the soldier next to him. Dina did not care. Finney slowly took the food. "Thank you," he whispered. She bit into the nutrient disc. It tasted like cardboard dipped in salt. "Delicious," she lied, and Finney made a small clicking sound that she would later learn was Sorali laughter. An hour later, she was not laughing at all. Commander Rolashin stood behind his desk like a wall of gray-green scales and polished armor. He was Draelith, nearly 7 feet tall, broad as a doorway, and decorated with campaign marks that ran from his jaw to the base of his thick tail. His office smelled like metal and discipline. He held her file open in his clawed hands. 3 commendations, he said. His voice was deep and flat. 2 formal reprimands, both for violating medical triage protocol. He looked at her over the edge of the file. "You saved soldiers you were ordered to let die." "They did not need to die," Dina said. "The protocol determined that they did. The protocol was wrong." Rule set the file down slowly. "Sergeant Harlow, the 9th Battalion operates under the Union Combat Codex. Every soldier, every medic, every officer follows it. Medical resources go to high-value species first. That is not my preference. It is the law." Dina said nothing. Rule continued. "You will report to Medic Overseer Talani. She will walk you through the species priority triage chart. You will sign the acknowledgement form, and you will follow it. Am I clear?" "Crystal," Dina said. Talani was a Branathi, 6-limbed, soft-voiced, and gentle in the way that people who have given up on fighting tend to be. She led Dina through the med bay, which was clean and efficient, and handed her a datapad with the triage chart displayed on it. Dina read it in silence. At the top of the priority list were the Draelith and Palori. In the middle were the Branathi and 2 other species. At the very bottom, below a line marked resources permitting, were the Sorali, resources permitting. That meant if there was medicine left over after everyone else had been treated, the Sorali might get some. "Maybe. Please sign at the bottom," Talani said quietly. There was no emotion in her voice. She had clearly handed this chart to many medics before. Dina stared at the datapad. Then she set it down on the counter and signed. "I will review it further," she said. Talani did not argue. She simply nodded and walked away. That evening, Finney found her in the med bay. He stood in the doorway with all 4 arms tucked close to his body, a posture Dina recognized as nervous. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, "for the food. No one has ever shared a meal with a Sorali on this ship." "Do humans not serve on this battalion?" she asked. "You are the first." Dina nodded slowly. "Do the other species treat your people like that all the time?" Finney's eyes dimmed slightly. "It is the protocol," he said, as if that explained everything. And in a way it did. The next morning, the battalion received deployment orders. Ardmore 6, Jungle Planet, toxic atmosphere, possible Vrethan Dominion activity near some old ruins. Commander Rule called it a standard sweep mission. Nothing to worry about. Dina had learned long ago that when officers said, "nothing to worry about," that was exactly when you should start worrying. As the dropships powered up and soldiers filed into their deployment lines, Talani appeared beside Dina. She held out the unsigned triage acknowledgement form. "You forgot this," she said. Dina took the datapad, looked at it for a moment, and then folded the physical copy underneath it into a small paper crane. She set it gently on the loading bay shelf. Talani tilted her head. "What is that?" "Where I come from," Dina said, stepping onto the dropship. "That means good luck." The doors sealed shut. The ship dropped toward Ardmore 6. And somewhere in the cargo hold, Finney Koo checked his old cracked filter mask and hoped it would last long enough. The jungle swallowed them whole. Ardmore 6 was not the kind of planet that welcomed visitors. It was the kind that chewed them up and spat out bones. The air was thick with yellow-green spore clouds that drifted between massive trees like lazy poison. The ground was soft and wet, and every step made a sucking sound, as if the planet was trying to pull them under. Dina stepped off the dropship ramp and immediately felt the burn in her throat, even through the filter mask. She tightened the seal and looked around. The battalion was spreading out into the jungle in standard formation. Drelith heavy troops in the front, Palori scouts on the flanks, and the Sorali bringing up the rear with supply crates strapped to their backs. She noticed it right away. The Sorali were wearing older model filter masks. The seals were cracked on some. The oxygen cycles were shorter, which meant they would need to change filters twice as often as everyone else. And she doubted they had been given extra cartridges. She pulled up her field communicator and filed a supply request for new Sorali filter masks. The denial came back in 4 minutes. Reason: insufficient priority rating. Dina stared at the screen, deleted the denial notification, and filed the request again under a different supply code. It was denied again in 6 minutes. She tucked the communicator away and made a mental note to steal some filters from the main supply crate later. The first patrol moved out at midday. Dina was assigned to the rear medical unit behind the main column. She could hear the jungle clicking and buzzing around them, alive with things she could not see. The Drelith soldiers moved confidently, their heavy armor crunching through undergrowth. The Palori were silent as shadows. The Sorali skittered along nervously, their forearms gripping their weapons too tightly. Finney was near the back, walking close to 2 other Sorali soldiers. He caught Dina's eye and gave a small wave with one of his lower arms. She nodded back. Then the jungle exploded. Green light flashed from the treeline. Bioacid rounds, the signature weapon of the Vrethan Dominion. The shots sizzled through the air and hit the column in 3 places. The Drelith front line returned fire instantly, their heavy rifles tearing apart the undergrowth. It was over in less than 2 minutes. The Vrethan scouts pulled back and vanished into the fog, but the damage was done. 3 Sorali soldiers were down. The bioacid had eaten through their light armor like water through paper. One was screaming. Another was trying to hold his side together with all 4 hands. The third, a young Sorali named Pick, was lying very still while Finney knelt beside him, clicking frantically. Dina ran toward them. She had her medkit open before she reached the first casualty. She dropped to her knees beside the screaming soldier and began applying neutralizer gel to the acid burns. A shadow fell over her. Medic Overseer Talani stood above her, calm and quiet. Sergeant Harlow, there is a Drelith officer with a shrapnel wound near the front of the column. You are needed there. Dina looked up. How bad? Minor laceration to the upper arm. Dina looked at the Sorali soldier beneath her hands. His chest plates were dissolving. This one is dying. The Drelith officer is priority 1. These casualties are priority 5. You know the protocol. Dina's jaw tightened. She stood up, grabbed her kit, and sprinted to the front of the column. The Drelith officer was sitting against a tree, looking annoyed. His wound was a scratch. A piece of bark had nicked him during the firefight. Dina cleaned it, sealed it with a single strip of medical tape, and was running back toward the Sorali in under 60 seconds. She saved 2 of them. The soldier with the chest wound would need surgery, but the neutralizer stopped the acid. The second soldier lost the use of one arm, but would live. Pick did not make it. Finney was still holding him when Dina arrived. The young Sorali's eyes had gone dark, and his 4 arms hung loose at his sides. Finney was making a low, steady clicking sound that Dina had never heard before. She did not need a translator to know what it meant. She knelt beside Finney and put her hand on his shoulder. He flinched at first, then slowly leaned into her touch. Commander Rule called her in that evening. He stood behind a field desk in the command tent, his tail swaying slowly. You treated the Drelith officer first, he said. I did, and then returned to the Sorali. Also correct. Talani says you spent less than 1 minute on the priority patient. He had a scratch. I gave him Band-Aid. Then I went where I was actually needed. Rule stared at her for a long time. You found a loophole, Sergeant. I found a way to save lives, Commander. Do not test me again. She said nothing. She did not need to. They both knew she would test him again the moment another soldier was bleeding. That night, Dina sat with Finney and a group of Sorali soldiers around a small light in their section of the camp. She asked them about Pick. She asked about their homeworld, their families, their customs for honoring the dead. They were stunned. For a long time, none of them spoke. Then an older Sorali soldier named Bira began a slow, rhythmic clicking. The others joined in, one by one, until the sound filled the dark jungle around them like rain on a tin roof. It was a death song for Pick. Dina sat with them through every note. She did not speak. She did not move. She just stayed. From across the camp, Lieutenant Goss Varen watched. He opened his personal log and typed. The human medic is a disciplinary risk. He paused, then added, Sorali unit morale has improved measurably since her arrival. He closed the log and listened to the clicking song until it faded into silence. 12 hours later, the deep-range sensors lit up red. The Vrethan were not scouting. They were invading, and the 9th Battalion was right in their path. The first Rithany border station received a single sensor warning 3 seconds before it ceased to exist. A wave of missiles, launched from ships still outside visual range, struck the station from 6 directions simultaneously. The shields held for half a second. Then the station was dust and expanding gas, tumbling silently into the void. Across 3 sectors of Rithany border space, the same thing happened at the same moment. 14 border stations, 9 patrol fleets, 2 communications hubs. All of them hit at once, in perfect coordination, with a violence so sudden that most Rithany crews never had time to send a distress signal. Earth's fleet poured through the gaps like water through broken glass. Captain Lena Farad's task force moved fastest. 12 ships, light and quick, racing along the route her intelligence had confirmed. The children's transport convoy was 4 hours ahead of her, escorted by 20 Rithany warships. Farad pushed her engines past safety limits. The Steadfast shook around her, hull plates groaning under the strain. She did not slow down. They caught the convoy in a narrow corridor between 2 star systems. The Rithany escorts detected them and turned to fight. 20 warships formed a defensive wall around the 6 transport vessels, their weapons charging, their communications screaming for reinforcements that would never arrive, because Earth had already destroyed every relay in the sector. Farad studied the formation on her display. The escorts were positioned tight around the transports. A direct assault risked hitting the children's ships with stray fire. She needed precision, not power. Target the escorts only, she ordered. Paired firing. Every shot confirmed before launch. If you're not certain of your target, you do not fire. Her ships spread into a crescent formation and opened fire. The battle was surgical. Earth's gunners picked apart the Rithany escorts one by one, targeting engines and weapon systems with focus strikes. Rithany ships exploded or went dark, spinning away from the convoy as their power failed. The escorts fought hard. They scored hits on 3 of Farad's ships. 1 cruiser lost its forward section entirely, but the line held in 18 minutes. All 20 escorts were destroyed or disabled. The 6 transport vessels drifted alone, undefended, their engines still running on autopilot. Boarding teams, go, Farad said. Marines launched from 4 ships and armored shuttles. They locked onto the transports, cut through hull plating, and breached the vessels in under 2 minutes. Inside, Rithany guards opened fire. The Marines pushed through them without hesitation. Every corridor was cleared, every guard neutralized, every holding cell opened. The children were alive. They were scared, cold, hungry, and some were sick. But they were alive. Marines moved through the transports, calling out in calm voices, kneeling down to the children's level. In the 3rd transport, a Marine named Sergeant Abra found Nura sitting in her corner, arms around the smaller girl, her unfinished letter still clutched in her hand. He knelt beside her. His face was hidden behind his helmet. So he took it off, showing her a human face, tired but smiling. Hey, we are from Earth. You're going home. Nura stared at him. Then she started crying. The smaller girl woke up and started crying too. Abra picked them both up, one in each arm, and carried them to the shuttle. While Farad secured the children, Admiral Aguilar's main fleet burned deeper into Rithany territory. They did not stop at the border. They did not pause to accept surrenders. Every military installation in their path was hit. Shipyards that had taken decades to build were reduced to wreckage in minutes. Defense platforms were overwhelmed and destroyed. Rithany patrol fleets, scrambled in panic, arrived at rally points only to find Earth's ships already waiting. The speed of it was the thing that broke the Rithany command structure. They had planned for a war that would last months. Earth was fighting a war that lasted hours to the Galactic Assembly. Species from across the galaxy watched the reports come in with something between horror and fascination. The chamber was full. Every delegation was present. The Rithany seats were empty. Ambassador Dara Osei stood at her podium. She was calm. She was always calm. She held a datapad in her hands and began to read. Names. Ages. Nura Osei, age 9. Kofi Mensah, age 7. Priya Sandoval, age 11. Yuki Ferreira, age 4. She read every name, every age. 2,114 children. It took 11 minutes. The chamber was completely silent. Some delegates looked away. Others could not stop watching. When she finished, she set down the datapad and looked at the empty Rithany seats. The Empire chose to answer humanity's good faith with the suffering of children. We are now answering in the only language the Empire appears to understand. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Counselor Fail watched her from across the chamber. He had served in the Assembly for 30 years. He had seen wars declared with fury and treaties signed with relief. He had never seen anything like this. Dara was not angry. She was not grieving. She was stating a fact, the way someone might state that water is wet or that stars burn. This was not revenge, he realized. This was simply what humans did when you touched their children. In Rithany space, High Sovereign Drelmok received the reports in his throne chamber. His border was gone. His fleets were scattering. His shipyards were burning. The children had been recovered. For the first time in his life, Drelmok felt fear. The spore bomb landed 30 feet from the medbay door and turned the air into poison. Dina felt the blast before she heard it, a dull pressure wave that knocked supplies off shelves and sent medics stumbling. Then the yellow cloud rolled in through the seams of the tent, thick and oily, and soldiers started coughing blood within seconds. Half the remaining medical supplies were contaminated. Antibiotics, neutralizer gel, burn patches, all soaked in Vrethan toxin and useless. Dina stood in the middle of the ruined medbay and looked at what she had left. It was not enough. Not by half. The battle was entering its second day, and the Vrethan had learned where the medical station was. She needed to think differently, or people were going to die. Finney appeared at the entrance, his forearms loaded with salvaged filter cartridges. I pulled these from the damaged supply crate, he said. Some still work. Good. Bring them in. Dina was already pulling apart a broken air filter, studying its components. She had an idea. It was stupid. It might work. Finney, your people, the Sorali, you can sense organic compounds, right? You can feel toxins in the air before the scanners detect them. Finney nodded slowly. We feel vibrations through our plates. Chemical vibrations is how we survived on our home world. Perfect. I need you and every Sorali who can walk to help me build something. Over the next 2 hours, Dina did something no union manual had ever described. She combined human field medicine knowledge with Sorali organic sensitivity and materials scavenged from the ancient ruins nearby. The jungle ruins were made of strange porous stone that absorbed toxins naturally. She ground it into powder, mixed it with filter mesh from damaged masks, and created crude but functional toxin absorbers. The Sorali guided her. They could feel which stone fragments were most effective, which mixtures would hold, and which would fall apart. Their 4 hands worked faster than any tool. Together, they built 40 improvised filters in 2 hours. That IT was ugly work. The filters looked like they had been assembled by children. But when Dina tested one on a contaminated air sample, it cleaned it. Soldiers who had been choking to death were breathing again within minutes. Commander Rule found her in the med bay, covered in dust and green stone powder, handing out filters to wounded soldiers. His expression was the complicated kind, anger and something else fighting behind his eyes. You were relieved of medical duties, he said. I was. Then Lieutenant Varin unreleased me. That is not a word. It is now. Rule looked around the med bay. Every stretcher was occupied. Every medic was working. The survival numbers on the display board were clear. Under Dina's system, 40% more soldiers were surviving their wounds than the Codex Standard Triage would have saved. Draelith soldiers, Palori soldiers, Sorali soldiers. All of them, he stared at those numbers for a long time. I am not reinstating you officially, he said. Understood. But I am not removing you again. He turned and left. Dina went back to work. An hour later, the Vrethan found the weak point. The Sorali section of the perimeter. The south wall, held by soldiers with the lightest armor and the oldest weapons. The enemy poured through the gap like water through a cracked dam, and the Sorali line began to break. Dina heard the screaming shift direction. She grabbed a weapon, a standard sidearm she had not fired since basic training, and ran toward the south wall. Not to fight. She was a terrible shot, and she knew it. She ran because she knew what soldiers needed when the line was breaking. They needed to see that someone was not running away. She reached the Sorali position and dropped behind a barricade next to Fenny. Around them, Sorali soldiers were firing in panicked bursts, their thin bodies pressed flat against whatever cover they could find. Some were already pulling back. Dina opened her medkit right there, in the middle of the firefight, and began treating the nearest wounded soldier. Fenny stared at her. What are you doing? Setting up a forward medical post. Here? We are being overrun. Then I better work fast. She looked at him. Fenny, tell them. Tell your people that their medic is right here. She is not leaving. If they hold, she holds. Fenny hesitated for 1 second. Then he turned and shouted in Sorali, a sharp, clicking burst that cut through the gunfire. Heads turned. Soldiers saw Dina kneeling in the dirt, calmly wrapping a wound while acid rounds burned the air above her head. They stopped retreating. One by one, they turned back to their positions. Then something unexpected happened. A Palori squad appeared on the left flank, weapons up, moving into position beside the Sorali. At their head was Lieutenant Goss Varin, his thin face set in hard determination. He had sent his own soldiers, elite Palori troops, to reinforce the lowest-ranked unit in the battalion. It had never happened before. Not once in the entire history of the Ninth. The combined force hit the Vrethan from 2 angles. The breach sealed. The line held. Afterward, in the brief quiet before the next wave, Fenny sat beside Dina behind the barricade. Both of them were breathing hard. Acid smoke drifted overhead. Why? Fenny asked. Why do you do this for species that are not your own? Dina wiped blood off her hands. When I was a girl, there were floods where I grew up. Bad ones. The water came in at night, fast. People climbed onto roofs, into boats, onto anything that floated. And when someone reached out a hand to pull you up, they did not check your species. They did not check your rank. They just pulled. She looked at him. That is the only protocol that ever made sense to me. From somewhere behind them, Commander Rule's voice came over the comm, send additional ammunition and supplies to the south section. Priority level high. Finney looked at Dina. She shrugged. Progress, she said. 12 hours. That was all they had to survive. Dina stood in the command tent and watched Commander Rule draw the situation on the tactical display. Red dots, Vrethan forces, surrounded them on every side like a closing fist. Blue dots, the battalion, were a thin, shrinking ring in the center. The numbers were not even close. 5-1 at best. Maybe worse. The extraction fleet will arrive in 12 hours, Rule said. His voice was steady but tired. Even a Drelith got tired after 2 days of war. Our ammunition is at 20%. Medical supplies are nearly gone. The perimeter cannot hold a full assault from all directions. He paused. Every officer in the tent leaned forward. The Combat Codex recommends a fighting retreat to a secondary defensible position here. He pointed to a ridge 2 kilometers north. It offers better terrain and narrower approach lanes. Goss Varen spoke first. What about the wounded? Rule's tail went still. That was how Dina knew the answer was bad. 19 soldiers cannot be moved. They would have to remain at the current position with a small guard. The Codex classifies this as acceptable loss. Silence filled the tent. Dina felt it pressing against her ribs. 19 soldiers. She knew without asking how many of them were Sorali. She knew because it was always the Sorali. 12 of the 19 are Sorali, Goss Varen confirmed quietly. 5 are Bernathi. 2 are Drelith. Rule said nothing. He did not need to. Everyone understood what acceptable loss meant for the species at the bottom of the chart. Dina stepped forward. There's another option. Every head turned. Rule's eyes narrowed. Speak. We do not retreat. We collapse the perimeter inward around the ruins. She pointed to the ancient structures at the center of their camp. These walls are solid stone. Natural fortification. We put the wounded inside, and we fight from the ruins outward. That is a smaller perimeter, Rule said. Easier to surround, but harder to break through. And we bring everyone. Nobody stays behind. Rule shook his head. The structural problem is not the walls. It is the squads. Our units are organized by species. Communication protocols differ. Command chains do not overlap. You cannot simply mix them together. Why not? The question hung in the air like smoke. Goss Varen cleared his throat. Commander, I have observed the Sorali unit's performance over the past 2 days. When integrated with support from other species, they held a section that should have collapsed. The human medics approach works. Integration works when soldiers trust each other. Rule stared at his second-in-command for a long moment. Then he looked at Dina. Then he looked at the map, covered in red. If this fails, he said slowly, it is on my record. And if it succeeds, Dina asked, then it is on yours. The reorganization was chaos. Beautiful, messy, necessary chaos. Drelith soldiers found themselves standing shoulder to shoulder with Sorali troops half their size. Palori officers who had never spoken to a Bernathi medic were suddenly sharing foxholes with them. Weapons were redistributed based on need, not species allocation. Communication was handled through a patchwork of translators, hand signals, and Dina running between squads making sure everyone understood the plan. Finney stood in the center of it, looking like he might be sick. He had been assigned as a squad leader for the first time, commanding a mixed unit of 4 Sorali and 3 Drelith soldiers, including Sergeant Doric, a scarred veteran who weighed 4 times as much as Finney. I cannot do this, Finney whispered to Dina. You already did it. At the south wall. You held that line. That was different. I was just fighting. Leading is just fighting while other people watch. She put her hand on his shoulder. You have already proved you belong here, Finney. Now show them. He clicked nervously. Then he straightened all 4 of his arms and walked to his squad. Sergeant Doric looked down at him. The Drelith's face was unreadable. You are my squad leader? Finney swallowed. I am. Doric stared for 3 long seconds. Then he nodded once. Tell me where to stand. The Vrethan final wave came at sunset, and it was everything the censors had promised. Thousands of enemy soldiers surged from the jungle in a screaming, hissing tide. Bioartillery exploded overhead, raining acid and spore clouds. The ground shook with each impact the mixed squads held. Not because they trusted each other perfectly. Not because the formation was smooth. They held because something had changed in the last 2 days, something the Codex had no section for. Each soldier looked at the one beside them and saw someone worth keeping alive. Finney's squad was positioned at the front of the ruins, where the fighting was thickest. The Vrethan hit them in waves. Finney directed fire with sharp clicks and hand signals, and Doric followed every command without hesitation. Then a bioacid round caught Doric in the side. The big Drelith went down hard, his armor hissing and dissolving. Finney did not think. He grabbed Doric's collar with all 4 arms and dragged him behind cover. He pulled the field dressing from his kit, the same kind Dina had taught him to use, and pressed it against the wound. Doric stared up at him, pain twisting his face. I never thought a Sorali would carry me. Finney tightened the bandage. I never thought a Drelith would let me. The line held. Barely. Ammunition was vanishing. 3 hours until extraction. Then Dina saw it. The Vrethan were swarming everywhere, except near one specific ruin structure. They moved around it like water around a stone, giving it wide space. Every single one of them avoided it. She grabbed her communicator. Commander, I see something. The ruins. The Vrethen will not go near the central structure. Something in there is disrupting them. A pause. Then Rule's voice, rough and exhausted. What are you suggesting, Sergeant? I am suggesting we find out why they are afraid of it, and make them a lot more afraid. Rule looked at the ruined structure on the tactical display, then at Dina, then back at the display. Around them, the command post shook with each Vrethen artillery impact. You are telling me, he said slowly, that an ancient building we know nothing about is emitting a frequency that disrupts the Vrethen, and you want to amplify it using our communication array. Yes. This is in no manual. No. It has never been tested. No. Rule exhaled through his teeth, a sound like gravel being crushed. Of course it has not. He looked at Gosvarin. The Palori lieutenant gave a single nod. Rule closed his eyes for 1 second. Do it. The work began immediately. A Palori tech officer named Sin began tearing apart the battalion's long-range communication array and rewiring it to interface with the ruined structure. The problem was calibration. The frequency the ruins emitted was organic, not electronic, and standard equipment could not read it properly. That was where the Sorali came in. Finney and 2 Sorali engineers knelt beside the ancient stone walls, pressing their plates against the surface, feeling the vibrations the way a human might feel a heartbeat through a chest wall. They guided Sin's adjustments click by click, their organic sensitivity doing what no scanner on the ship could do. A little lower, Finney said, his eyes closed. The vibration is deeper, slower, like something breathing underground. Sin adjusted the frequency. There. Finney's plates buzzed. There. Lock it. Outside. The Vrethen launched their final wave. Every remaining soldier they had came out of the jungle at once. A wall of hissing, armored bodies stretching from tree-line to tree-line. The ground trembled under the weight of them. The sky turned green with acid fire. The mixed squads opened fire. Every weapon, every species, every soldier, together. The ruins became a fortress of desperate, coordinated defense. Drelith heavy gunners laid down suppressing fire, while Sorali soldiers darted between positions carrying ammunition with their 4 quick arms. Palori snipers picked off Vrethen commanders while Bernathi medics dragged wounded to safety. Dina was everywhere. She moved between the defensive line and the ruin entrance, treating wounds, shouting encouragement, keeping soldiers on their feet by sheer will. A bioacid round clipped her left arm, and she felt the burn cut through her sleeve and into her skin. She hissed, ripped a strip from her uniform, wrapped it tight, and kept moving to the ruins entrance. Finney's squad held the most critical position. If the Vrethen broke through there, they would reach the amplifier team inside. Sergeant Doric stood beside Finney, bandaged and bleeding, but firing with both hands. The Drelith and Sorali soldiers fought as one unit, covering each other, calling out targets in a mix of clicks and growls that should not have worked as a language, but did out of Vrethen breacher charge the barricade. Finney shot twice. Doric smashed it down with the butt of his rifle. They looked at each other and kept firing. Inside the ruin, Sin shouted, "Ready! Activating now!" The amplifier powered on. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the sound hit, not a sound anyone could hear, but a pressure wave that rippled through the jungle like a stone dropped into still water. The Vrethen felt it immediately. Their coordinated advance stuttered. Soldiers stumbled. Fire patterns that had been precise and deadly became scattered, random. A group of Vrethen on the east side turned and began firing at their own flanks. Their swarm intelligence, the biological network that connected every Vrethen soldier to every other, was breaking apart. Individual Vrethen soldiers, cut off from the collective, panicked. Some ran. Some froze. Some attacked anything that moved, including each other. The assault collapsed in minutes. The jungle fell silent except for the sound of retreating bodies crashing through undergrowth and the low hum of the amplifier doing its work. Dina leaned against a ruined wall and slid to the ground. Her arm was burning. Her legs were shaking. She was covered in blood from 6 different species, including her own. Finney sat down beside her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The extraction fleet arrived 2 hours later. Dropships descended through the spore clouds and landed in a ring around the ruins. Medical teams poured out. Stretchers were loaded. Soldiers were carried to safety, every single one of them. All 19 wounded who would have been left behind. Every Sorali, every Drelith, every Palori and Bernathi. Not one life lost to the triage chart that on the steadfast accord. Admiral Karadin sat behind her desk and read the after-action report twice. Then she called Dina and Rule into her office. 14 violations of the Combat Codex, she said, looking at Dina. 14. Dina stood at attention. Yes, Admiral, and the highest casualty survival rate of any unit in the entire Ardenmoor campaign. Din set down the report. She looked at Rule. Commander, your assessment. Rule stood rigid, his tail perfectly still. He was quiet for a long time. Then he spoke. Sergeant Harlow did not follow our rules. She wrote better ones. I am requesting that her field triage model be submitted for official review as a new Union standard. Din studied them both. Then she nodded, approved. And, Sergeant Harlow, it is Lieutenant Harlow now. You will lead the Union's first integrated combat medical corps. Triage by need, not by species. That evening, Dina walked into the mess hall of the Steadfast Accord. She stopped in the doorway. Finney sat at a table in the center of the room. Not the back. Not alone. Around him sat Sorali soldiers, Dralith soldiers, Palori officers, and Bernathi medics. Eating together. Talking. One of the Dralith was attempting a Sorali clicking sound and getting it completely wrong, while Finney tried to teach him through fits of laughter. Finney saw Dina and waved her over. She sat down, and a Dralith soldier pushed a ration pack toward her. We heard humans like to share, he said. Dina smiled. She opened the pack, divided it among the table, and ate with her battalion. Somewhere in the Galactic Union's archives, the old species priority triage chart still existed, stamped, filed, and officially outdated. In its place, a new protocol carried a simple heading. Treat the one who needs it most. No species rankings. No priority codes. No fine print. Just a handwritten note in the margin, in human script. Good luck.